Good Sunday morning, Northeast Ohio, on this 13th day of October. It was on this day back in 1902 that then President Teddy Roosevelt was dealing with a 5-month-long strike of eastern Pennsylvania coal miners. With no end in sight and winter coming, he decided to take the unprecedented move of getting involved, even going so far as threatening to have U.S. troops man the mine until both sides agreed to go to arbitration, which they eventually did. The current nationwide strike against GM at almost a month doesn't carry the same sense of national concern, but for those in the middle of it, bringing it to an end is priority one. It still likely won't fix the problems, though, that many are facing in the wake of Lordstown's closing. There has been no work stoppage at the Lordstown assembly plant as a result of the nationwide strike against GM because there has been no work to stop. 7 months ago this week, the last Chevy Cruze rolled off the assembly line and the plant was idled. Still on this day, and every day since the strike started, you'll find picketers at the empty plant. Some are former workers like Kim and Ron who passed on transfers to a plant in Missouri for family reasons.
I have my home paid off, my kids, my grandkids are all here, and that's just not an option.
Others are like Glenn, who retired from here in 2000 after 30 years. His first year on the job included the strike of 1970.
I worked here 3 months and we went on strike for 2 months.
As a young man, it was easier to manage that strike because his son and daughter weren't born yet. They would come along later and they too would grow up to follow in their father's footsteps and go to work for GM here in Lordstown. And in retirement, Glenn was enjoying his life with his family around him. That changed earlier this year, and now Glenn finds himself like he is on this picket line, alone.
My son's been here 20 years, and they forced him to Wentzville over in Missouri. He's out there now. They put my daughter in Bowling Green. She's got 25 years in, and they forced her to Bowling Green, Kentucky.
So you went from having your family around you
to nobody.
So he's here in part for them, his immediate family, and for the extended one of 48,000.
We're supporting not only this plant trying to get jobs here, but everybody in the UAW across the country. And that's what it's all about, is the union is supporting each other. That's what makes the union strong. If you don't have that support, you don't have a union.
When it comes to labor in America, the past is prologue, and many will say we can learn a lot about where we are going by looking back at where we have been. An area where that rings true is when it comes to the health of the economy and American steel. 11 years ago this month, we were sent to a hastily called news conference here in the parking lot of Steelworkers Local 979. I remember it vividly because in the economic collapse of 2008, it was the moment that we learned this was about to get real. Steelmaker ArcelorMittal had gone from its best third quarter ever that year to 0 orders in the fourth. None.
I've been in this plant for 38 years. Never, ever have we seen dramatic changes to that nature.
That day in 2008, the plant's 2 blast furnaces were hot idled or shut down, putting the fate of the then 1,400 workers in the balance. As the economy rebounded, so too did the Cleveland steel mill, coming back even stronger, a bellwether of the economy as a whole.
In many of our slowdowns in the steel industry, this plant, for one, has led the beginning of a slowdown, and almost typically when we come out of a slowdown, the economy seems to follow.
That's because with every job in a mill like this, it impacts an estimated 3 to 5 jobs out of it. So what do they see now?
It's tenuous right now. We're currently running at a reduced capacity, and our orders are down. It's a strange time. Imports are down, orders are down, prices are down.
That being said,
we actually just hired 19 people yesterday. And that's because we're so short of people, we can't find skilled craftsmen.
So that is a positive. But what they've learned from past slowdowns like 2008,
it changes so fast.
Well, coming up on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, 2 major stories involving the White House, one being the impeachment inquiry process, the other being the decision to pull U.S. troops from the northern Syrian border with Turkey, both of which we discuss this week with Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. As she watches Turkish forces striking Kurdish targets in northern Syria days after President Trump pulled U.S. troops from the region and in turn U.S. support for the Kurds, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur finds herself asking a question to which she likely already knows the answer.
So what's going to happen to the Kurds? Are we simply going to leave them to die? I just can't believe that the President of the United States would allow this to happen to the Kurds who have stood by America's side almost alone many times in that part of the world.
She is not alone. Republicans like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell expressing the same. Even the president's ally, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, warning against the ethnic cleansing that could soon occur.
I think it makes Israel more vulnerable. I think it creates a great deal of instability in that part of the world. It already had enough.
As for the impeachment process, Kaptur first became aware something was up when, as co-chair of the Congressional Ukrainian Caucus, she learned U.S. funds were being held up.
I fought for that money. Nobody fights harder inside of the Defense Committee than I do for Ukraine. All the members sort of laugh about it because they know how to put in my 2 cents. But I thought we can't delay aid to Ukraine because they're at war, for heaven's sake.
She supports the impeachment inquiry and calls on the administration's cooperation and says it's important for the whistleblower's identity to remain a secret.
Let me tell you, when you deal with Russia, and I view them as heavily involved in this, clandestinely, in ways that we haven't even completely figured out yet, you have to guard people's lives first.
And she called on those in Congress to look at this the same way they look at those attacks in Syria.
This is a time when it's a country over party, and we have to assure the American people that our system will work.
With Democracy 2019, I'm John Kosich. Enjoy your Sunday.